So you guys enjoyed the last 3 times I gave Kamen Riders Pokemon typings. So I figured it was about time that we got into the Saber Riders. And these riders are actually easier to give typings to because they're mostly based off of elemental magic. But in order to transform, they use books ranging from different folktales and stories. And obviously a sword that's based on a different element. But without further ado, let's get right into it with Kamen Rider Saber. Now, Kamen Rider Saber's base form is Brave Dragon. And I think this goes without saying that it is going to be a fire dragon type. And obviously this is because Saber's theme is fire and dragons. Nothing really much to say about it. But up next we have Dragon Jackun, which is fire and grass. And the reason for this is because Brave Dragon is fire, and then he has the Jack and the Beanstalk book, and I think we all know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, so that's where he got the grass type. But up next we have Dragon Peter, which is Fire Fairy. And it's the same thing as last time. He uses the Brave Dragon book, and then he also uses the Peter Pan book. And if you know the story of Peter Pan has magic, and he also has Tinkerbell. And in this form, Saber actually gets a fairy, which is a knockoff to Tinkerbell. But up next we have Dragon Hedgehog, which is Fire Normal. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know what to do with this one. It's a literal hedgehog, but we can give him Pin Missile though. Moving on, we have Dragon Bremen, which is Fire Electric. But I'm gonna give it the ability Punk Rock. And it's a speaker form. Do I really need to say much? Also, in case you didn't know, Punk Rock boosts sound-based attacks, so this fits the form. But up next we have Dragon Alangina, which is Fire Psychic. And again, do I really need to explain much? He literally has a genie lamp on his shoulder. But up next we have Dragon Arthur Saber, which is Fire Fairy. Now obviously you know where the fire typing comes from. And the reason for the fairy typing is because King Arthur is a folk hero in many legends. But up next we have Crimson Dragon Saber, which is pure fire. Now you might be wondering, why is it pure fire? But it's mostly because it's based off of multiple fire books and not all of them are dragon. So thus, pure fire. Next up we have Dragon Hedgehog Peter Saber, which is normal fairy. Now this one combines Brave Dragon, Needle Hedgehog, and Peter Fantasia. So basically I took the Needle Hedgehog typing and the Peter Fantasia typing and combined those, and then I gave it the Terra Fire because of the Rekka and the sword, and then also because of Brave Dragon. But up next we have Draconic Knight, which is Fire Steel. And this one uses Brave Dragon just like before, but now he is a knight, so that's where I got the steel typing from. But up next we have our Berserk form with Primitive Dragon, which is Dark Dragon. Now obviously I got the dark typing from it being a Berserk form, but also because of all the depression that is inside the one book. And as for the dragon typing, this one literally has a dragon claw going straight across the chest, so I figured it'd just fit. And definitely not because we have a bunch of fire types already. But up next we have Primitive Dragon with Senki, which is Water Dragon. And to get this form he uses Lion Senki, which is a water typing. Now up next we have Elemental Dragon, which is Fire Dragon. And this is basically Primitive Dragon in full control by Toma. So this is basically a B-tier form of Brave Dragon. But up next we have my favorite Saber form, which is Super Hyoujuusenki. And it is a fighting type. Now the fighting typing is because Super Sentai and Kamen Rider are superheroes, and most superheroes in Pokemon are fighting types. But up next we have our final form with Cross Saber being Normal Dragon. And I'm also going to give it the multi-type ability because he can use all the different swords at once, and that normal type is going to change with the swords. But up next we have Crimson Cross Saber, which is normal fire. And the reason for that is because he uses the fire from all the Rekka books, and obviously the normal typing comes from Cross Saber. But up next we have Featuring Cross Saber, which is normal with the multi-type ability. And this is because it uses all 3 Senki books, so it's just pure normal. But let me know what your thoughts are on that one. But up next we have our Kamen Rider Ghost form, which is Ghost Ijinroku, which is obviously Ghost Fire. And it literally just combines Kamen Rider Ghost and Kamen Rider Saber, so there's really nothing to really explain with that one. But up next we have one of our movie forms being Emotional Dragon, which is Fairy Dark with the Terra type being Fire. Now the Terra type comes from Brave Dragon, but as for the Fairy typing, it comes from the rune Bright Dragon, which uses mostly light-based attacks, and most light-based attacks are normally associated with the Fairy typing. But as for the dark typing, it comes from the rune Dim Dragon, which obviously uses more dark-based attacks. But up next we have Dragon TVKun, which is Fire Fairy. Now obviously he uses Brave Dragon, and then he also uses Kamen Rider Saikou's book, which is a fairy type. Now I normally don't do stage show forms, but this one is just badass. I absolutely love this form. It looks sick, and it is Ultimate Bahamut, which is Dark Dragon. Now, Behemoth is a real-life dark beast from the Book of Job, and he also uses the power of Cross Saber in this form, so it just fit the Dark Dragon typing. But now that we're done with Saber, let's get into Kamen Rider Blades with Lion Senki, which is a pure water type. And I mean, there's nothing really to explain. It's literally a water lion. Do I really need to explain further? But up next we have Lion Fantasia, which is water fairy. And obviously it just carries over the Lion Senki book, but he also uses the Peter Pan book, which we already said was a fairy type. But up next we have Fantastic Lion, which is water fairy. And again, he has the Peter Pan book, but now he has the Pegasus book, so I guess he gets a fairy buff. I don't know if there's an ability that buffs fairy typing attacks, but if there is one, let me know, future me. But up next we have King Lion Daisenki, which is water steel. Now the reason for the steel typing is because he literally turns into a big giant lion mech, which looks absolutely sick, but also he has pressurized cannons that come out of his shoulders. Now I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even gonna try to say Blade's final form's name, but it's going to be Ice Water. Now the reason for the ice typing is because he can control ice, and also he looks like a big giant yeti. But up next we have another Kamen Rider Ghost form with Specter Gekikou, which is obviously again Ghost Water. And again, it's because it's combining Kamen Rider Specter and Kamen Rider Blades. But up next we have Kamen Rider Espada with Lamp Du Alangina, which is electric psychic. And the reason for this is because it uses energy based attacks, and it also uses a lamp book. But up next we have Lamp Du Hedgehog, which is electric normal. And again, it's energy based attacks, and I would also give it pin missile in this form. Now up next we have Golden Alangina, which is electric steel. Now the reason for the steel typing is because he's all armored up here. But up next we have his final form, which is Arabian Night, which is dark electric. Now with this one, I was a little bit on the fence with the typing. I was on the fence between dark and psychic. I ended up going with the dark typing because he has more of a night theme going, but let me know what you guys think. Now next up we have Kamen Rider Buster with Rock Ground. And the reason for that is because he uses mostly ground and rock based attacks. Not really much to explain with that one. But when he uses Jackun, he gains the grass typing and carries on the rock typing. And obviously he's using the Jack and the Beanstalk book, so that's where he gets the grass typing. But up next we have Kamen Rider Kenzan, which is dark flying. And this is literally because he's a wind ninja. And most ninjas and Pokemon are mostly associated with the dark typing, aka Greninja and all of that. But up next we have Ninja Jackun, which is grass dark. And he basically becomes a grass ninja by using the Jack and the Beanstalk book, so that's where he gets the grass typing. But for his final form, which is Ninja Buddha-san, I decided to give him grass flying. And the reason for the grass typing is because he has wood straws that are like from trees and all of that, which is used for like training and all of that. But the flying type comes from a hurricane attack that he uses in this form. Now up next we have Kamen Rider Slash, which is pure fairy. And the reason for the fairy typing is because he uses the Hansel and Gretel book, which is also a fairy tale. But I also consider giving him the punk rock ability since he is a rhythm-based rider. But he also has his Hansel Bremen form, which is fairy electric. And in this form, he literally has a big giant speaker on his left shoulder. Do I really need to explain much? Now up next we have Kamen Rider Calibur, which is Dark Dragon. Now Kamen Rider Calibur was originally a villain, so that's where I got the dark typing, and then obviously uses the dragon book. But we also have Jiao Dragon, which is Dark Dragon, but it gains the Steel Terra type. And that's because it's all armored up in this form. Nothing really to explain with this one. Now up next we have one of my favorite Kamen Riders in the entirety of Saber, which is Kamen Rider Saikou in his sword form. Now obviously the sword form is not my favorite form of his, it's the later forms. But Kamen Rider Saikou is going to be Steel Fairy, and he's legit a sword. Do I really need to explain the steel typing? And as for the fairy typing, he's a character from years ago, and he also uses the power of light, which is a motif for fairy types and all of that, so that's the explanation. But up next we have his shadow form, which is a pure dark typing. And again, do I really need to explain this one? It's literally just a shadow controlling his sword. But up next we have my favorite form of his, which is X-Swordsman. And that is going to be a steel fighting type. Now obviously the steel typing comes from the fact that he's a sword, but the fighting type is because he's based off of superheroes and comics. And most superhero Pokemon are fighting types. But up next we have Swordman Powerful, which is dark steel. And this one just combines Saikou and the comic form together into one form. And then we have his final form, which is Swordman Wonderful, which is dark fighting. And it's the same deal as Swordsman, just it's more powerful, and he also uses more kicking based attacks, so that's where I got the fighting type. But up next we have Kamen Rider Sabela, which is pure bug type. And can I be honest, Kamen Rider Sabela has probably one of the coolest abilities in the entirety of Saber. She can sprout butterfly wings and spider legs from her back and spew out spider silk from her hands. That is absolutely sick in my opinion. But up next we have her brother, which is Kamen Rider Durandal, which is a pure water type. And the reason for this is because he's literally Poseidon. Like, that sword looks exactly like Poseidon's staff. Now next up we have Kamen Rider Falchion. Now Kamen Rider Falchion actually has two different users. For its Eternal Phoenix form we have Fire Dark. Now I think this one's self-explanatory, but he uses fire-based attacks and he's evil, and he also uses the Phoenix book. This typing just made sense. But for its amazing siren form we have Water Psychic, and the reason for that is because it's based off of a siren. And sirens can actually make people hallucinate, so that's where I got the Psychic type. But up next we have a Kamen Rider Outsider spoiler. If you haven't seen Kamen Rider Outsiders, go watch it. It's a clusterfuck, but you'll enjoy it. Anyways, we have Kamen Rider Desast, which is a pure dark type. And the reason for this is because he's literally a demon ninja. But up next we have Kamen Rider Soloman, which is a pure dark type. Now I don't really have a reason for why he's just the dark typing, except that he's just an evil rider. There really isn't much to say. But we do have a lot to say about Kamen Rider Storious, which is poison dark. Now the reason for the poison typing isn't because he literally uses poison attacks, it's more of a metaphorical poison type. And this is because he was so thirsty for power that it poisoned him to become evil, thus the dark typing. But with that, I need to shout out Pixel Steven and Kamen Rider. Without them, this would have taken much longer than expected since my Saber knowledge isn't the best. But let me know your thoughts on these typings down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on. If we can hit 50 likes on this video, I'll get 01 out as soon as possible. But with that, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. I'm Falplace, and I'm out. Peace.